January 23rd is the day we celebrate Subhash Chandra Bose Jayanti. Today, on his 125th birth anniversary, we shall take a journey through his noteworthy speeches and his crystal clear message reflected by his own words. Subhash Chandra Bose has borne through life the flaming torch of patriotism. With his fiery spark of enthusiasm, he lit the entire wilderness of political passivity. The writings and speeches of Bose are aglow with the warmth of his feelings and capture and reflect the very person that he was. This first piece that we are going to talk about is from a broadcast from Berlin recorded on April 20, 1942. Bose addresses his countrymen and brings to their attention who the real enemy of India was. This is India has but one enemy. In spite of British propaganda, it should be clear to all right thinking Indians that in this wide world, India has but one enemy, the enemy who has exploited her for over 100 years, the enemy who sucks the lifeblood of Mother India. British imperialism. I'm not an apologist of the tripartite powers. That is not my job. My concern is with India. When British imperialism is defeated, India will get her freedom. If, on the other hand, British imperialism should somehow win the war, then India's slavery would be perpetuated forever. India is therefore presented with a choice between freedom and slavery. She must make her choice. Britain's paid propagandists have been calling me an enemy agent. I need no credentials when I speak to my own people. My whole life is one long, persistent, uncompromising struggle against British imperialism and is the best guarantee of my bona fides. All my life I have been the servant of India. Until the last hour of my life, I shall remain one. My allegiance and loyalty have been and will ever be to India alone, no matter in which part of the world I may live. If you make a dispassionate and objective study of the different theaters of war today, you will come to the same conclusion as myself that nothing on earth can prevent the rapid collapse of the British Empire. Already, the outposts in the Indian Ocean have passed out of the hands of British sea power. Mandalay has fallen, and elite troops are practically expelled from Burmese soil. Countrymen, as the British Empire disappears, the day of India's deliverance approaches. I want to remind you that in the year 1857 began India's first war of independence. In 1942 has begun her last war of independence. Gird up your loins. The hour of India's salvation is at hand. Azad Hind, fight and win India's liberty, and then build up India with full freedom to determine her own future with no interference. Free India will have a social order based on the eternal principles of justice, equality, and fraternity. Bose has played a vital part in molding the destiny of this subcontinent. He has carried out the war of liberation by a frontal attack on the citadels of British bureaucracy. This next speech was broadcasted from Tokyo, retranslated from the Tamil version published in the Tamil Nesan, Kuala Lumpur, dated June 23, 1943. Bose urges Indian nationalists to not pay heed to British distractions and focus on their goal of independence. This is Beware of Compromise Offers. When we talk of India's freedom, there is no room for compromise. All Indians should realize this fully. There is only one meaning to freedom. The British and their friends should en bloc leave India with their bag and baggage. Those who thirst for freedom should necessarily fight for it tooth and nail and should pay the price in the form of their blood. We should therefore carry on the struggle from outside as well as inside India. We should fight with all our energy and vigor. If we work with strong will and faith, the Anglo American imperialist madness will be curbed in the end, the British Empire will crumble, and free India will rise up with a new life. Whatever might happen in the world, the British will never change their policy of imperialist domination over India. The British Empire will rather end than bend itself. No Indian, therefore, need think even in his dreams that Britain would ever recognize the freedom of India one day or other. As British imperialism owes its growth to India, the British are tenaciously holding on to it. All the Britishers, to whichever party they may belong, have fattened themselves on the wealth looted from India. Therefore, imperialism to them only means India. They have waged bloody wars in order to keep this empire in their hands. If the British were to win this war by recognizing the freedom of India, it will only be a victory minus the empire. In order to save this empire, John Bull is shedding his blood profusely. The only way to compensate this loss, at least partially, will be to exploit India after the war with unprecedented rapacity. According to the logic of the imperialists, therefore, the more the deterioration of Britain's position, the more will be the necessity of strengthening their domination over India. However, I expect that the British politicians may make some sign of compromise before the year is out. But I wish to emphasize that such a sign will only be a fraud. Just as they did between December 1941 and December 1942, the British will only try to divert the Indians from the freedom struggle and to undermine the country's determination and morale by protracted negotiations. The Anglo Americans are bluffing that they will start counterattacks on Burma, but the important thing to be noted by us is that their publicity stunt of reconquering Burma has only ended in their shameful withdrawal. The victorious Japanese army is now right on the eastern frontiers of our country. The Japanese government, through their illustrious Prime Minister, have repeatedly announced that they fully support the cause of Indian freedom and that they are determined to root out Anglo American domination and influence from India. Further, the Japanese Prime Minister has said that if the Indian revolutionaries in their struggle for complete independence require it, Japan would give them effective assistance. If Singapore, which had been built in 20 years as a military base, was to be lost in a week's time, then how many days will it take for the British Supreme Commander, who is always on the run, or his successor, to withdraw from the frontier strongholds? The speeches and writings of Netaji are the very soul of the radical elements in the Indian National Congress. It is hardly necessary for me to dilate upon their importance. Here's another speech from the man himself from October 26, 1943. Bose calls out the rich for their half-hearted contributions to the cause of Indian independence and draws contrast between them and the poor classes. This is a word to the rich. Look at those who have volunteered to join the Indian National Army and who are now getting the necessary training. They do not know how many of them will live to see India free. They are getting ready with the one thought of shedding their last drop of blood. They are getting ready to go to a free India or to die on the way. There is no program of retreat for them. When the INA is getting trained either to march to victory or to spill its last drop of blood on the way, the rich people are asking me whether total mobilization means 10% or 5% of their riches. I would ask these people who are speaking of percentages whether we can tell our soldiers to fight and spill only 10% of their blood and save the rest. The poor classes have been coming forward voluntarily and with enthusiastic spirit to offer everything that they have. Poorer class Indians like watchmen, washermen, barbers, petty shopkeepers, and gwalas have come forward with all they have. And in addition to that, some of them have also offered to become volunteers. Some of the poor people came to me, and not only did they give all the cash they had in their pockets, but went further and gave me their saving bank books, which represent their life savings. Are there not rich men among the Indians in Malaya who can come forward and say in the same spirit, "Here is my bank book for the cause of Indian independence"? Indians as a nation believe in the ideal of sacrifice. Among the Hindus, we have the ideal of sannyasis, and the Muslims have the way of the fakirs. Can there be a greater cause, a nobler cause, and a holier cause than the liberation of 38 crores of human souls? My request to Malaya is for 10 crores of rupees, which would be approximately 10% of the value of Indian possessions in Malaya. Calling for unity and togetherness, Netaji gave the speech in Burma on September 12, 1944, talking about Gandhi and Jinnah's upcoming discussion regarding partition of Indian motherland into Hindu India and Muslim Pakistan. Bose expressed his concerns on divided India and called for fight against the British. This is warning against partition. Friends and countrymen, I want to talk to you today about the Indian situation. You are all aware that Gandhiji and Mr. Jinnah are discussing the Hindu-Muslim question in Bombay and that Gandhiji is prepared to come to an agreement with the League, even if it means conceding the League demand of Pakistan. I know that you're very anxious to know what we Indians abroad think about Gandhiji's attempt to pacify the League. We, Indians in East Asia, are today fighting for a free and united India. We are resolved to liberate our motherland and we are confident that we shall ultimately succeed. However long and bitter the struggle, we are convinced that truth and justice will finally triumph and that our struggle for India's liberation will be successful. Therefore, we shall never be a party to any compromise with Britain. The very idea of a compromise with the British is repugnant to us. It will, we very strongly feel, mean the perpetuation of our slavery. Friends, we have resolved to create a united and free India. Therefore, we shall oppose all attempts to divide her and cut her up into bits. Ireland and Palestine have taught us a lesson. We have realized that to divide a country will ruin it economically, culturally, and politically. America could not have risen to her present greatness had the American Pakistanis been allowed their own way. We can easily solve the minorities problem once we are free from foreign domination. We should have the Soviet Union as our example. There are more races in the Soviet Union than in India, yet they are all united today. Why? Because they are free and do not have to bow to a foreign ruler. Personally, I have great respect for Mr. Jinnah, President of the Muslim League. I and my party have been in close contact with him and have cooperated with the League in the past. And I am opposed neither to the League nor to its illustrious leader, but I vehemently oppose the Pakistan scheme for the vivisecting of our motherland. During the first 3 years of the present war, the Anglo Americans suffered one reverse after another, but they never thought of capitulation or surrender. They fought on with the hope that sooner or later their luck would turn, and their hope was justified. They have achieved many victories, but that will not make them slacken their war effort. Nor does it mean that our allies will slacken their efforts or surrender. I suspect that there are some in India who believe that this is possible. They have been duped by the barrage of propaganda let loose on India and the world by the Anglo Americans. I cannot but feel sorry to see that even some of the congressmen have been taken in by it. These Jews believe that the Allies are well on the way to victory and are therefore anxious to come to a compromise with British imperialism. If we stop to think for a moment, we shall realize that final victory will go to the Axis. The war will be decided not in the West but in the East. Our attacks during the last 6 months have given us an idea of our enemy's strength. During these 6 months, in spite of his dogged attempts, he was decisively beaten in many sectors, and our victorious troops drove him out of the Kaladan, Haka, Tiddim, Bishanpur, Palel, and Kohima areas. True, there is a lull in the fighting just now, but that is mainly due to the monsoon which has forced us to take the defensive. As we have already routed the enemy more than once, we are confident that we can do so again. We are resolved to fight till the motherland is free. We are aware that the struggle ahead of us will be a long and bitter one, and that it may take as long as 2 years or more to liberate India. But we must remember that the Anglo Americans were able to gain only a few successes after 5 years of intense warfare. We shall not be discouraged if some time passes before we meet with success. We should not compromise with the British thinking that they are now winning, because then it will be impossible to liberate our motherland. The agreement between the League and the Congress will be a forerunner of compromise with Britain. If this should happen, India will remain a slave country forever. As long as the Congress and Muslim League are separated, there will be no compromise with the British. That is why the congressmen who want to come to a compromise with Britain have decided to swallow the bitter pill of Pakistan. I wish to remind both the Congress and the Muslim League leaders that even if there is an agreement between these two parties regarding the Pakistan issue, Britain will not grant freedom to India. They have already proved this by saying that the interests of the minorities and the princes should be safeguarded. Those who believe that a compromise between the Muslim League and the Congress will persuade Britain to grant India freedom are only deceiving themselves. That being so, I fail to see the necessity for an approachment between the League and the Congress. I am sure that even if Pakistan is conceded, it will not solve our problem. The League will never fight the British as we do. All that it wants is the division of India into Hindu and Muslim states. There will be 4 Muslim states which will remain under British influence. So, instead of a single slave India, we shall have 4 different slave Muslim states abiding and abetting Britain. The British will ignore the Congress League agreement if it is against their interest. They will not relinquish their hold on India. I ask the millions of Muslim young men in India, will you be a party to the vivisection of your motherland? What will your status be in a divided India? Therefore, my friends, if you want freedom, you must fight for it and kick the British out. There should be no compromise with Britain. Our divine motherland shall not be cut up. Inqilab Zindabad, Azad Hind Zindabad. This next speech is an excerpt from a broadcast from Singapore on June 24, 1945, where Subhash Chandra Bose talks about the cruciality of optimism while aiming for big victories and the support from Japanese Prime Minister to Indian National Army. This is the revolutionary spirit. In spite of our recent reverses in Burma, our optimism and our confidence in our final victory remain unimpaired. India's independence can be won by the end of this war because of three principal factors. Firstly, our armed struggle in East Asia. Secondly, diplomacy in the international field. And thirdly, resistance inside India. It goes without saying that the greater the resistance inside India, the less time will it take for us to win our independence. But even if resistance inside India is only moral in character, India will remain an international issue and there will be ample scope for discussion in the international field. The most important problem for us is to continue the bitter struggle against the British in East Asia. This will have a twofold effect in that it will influence the cause of India and it will also help to purge our countrymen at home of the defeatist mentality which is the result of successful enemy propaganda. Secondly, it would tend to reveal our rightful claim before the world and enable us to secure the support of friendly powers. To continue the armed struggle, we must keep our confidence in our final victory. In this connection, I want to refer to what Marshal Foch wrote in his memoirs. Talking of victory and defeat, Marshal Foch said, "That army is beaten which considered itself to be beaten." So, as long as an army does not consider itself to be beaten, defeat in any particular area does not mean real defeat. The British, for example, were expelled from Burma in 1942, but they have managed to re enter Burma. Who can say that we shall not recapture in Burma what we have lost? When we were withdrawing from Burma, I reminded my comrades of the above remark of Marshal Foch, and I pointed out that we were not beaten by any means, because not one of us felt that he was beaten or that the battle was lost. A true revolutionary is one who never acknowledges defeat, who never feels depressed or disheartened. A true revolutionary believes in the justice of his cause and is confident that his cause is bound to prevail in the long run. Though we have lost the first round of the Battle of Burma, I find that we have been able to influence even the enemy. After entering Burma, the enemy was able to see and hear something of the work of the provincial government of Azad Hind, of the Azad Hind Fauj. Previously, the enemy used to refer to us as the Japanese puppet army. After entering Burma, he began to call us the Japanese-inspired Indian National Army, but now they refer to us as the Indian National Army. When the British took Mandalay, they issued an order that no Indian was to use the greeting Jai Hind, which, as you know, means victory to India. The result of this order was that boys and girls of our Balak Sena in Mandalay came out in the streets and greeted British officials with Jai Hind. Our point is that if we go on fighting bravely and shedding our blood, we shall not only be able to influence those of our countrymen who are indifferent and lukewarm, but we shall also be able to impress the enemy.